Always be recording.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, it's overwhelming the start of this year. Honestly, it's overwhelming. The amount of thud that's in what 4 short weeks, 5 short weeks. Not at the end of January yet. So much weird storytelling.
Grab a drink. It's time for another episode of Off the Record on the Rocks. Join Michael Toner and Ankarina Lara as we discuss the latest in all things Web3, AI, metaverse, and crypto. Tune out the noise and turn up the signal as we pour ourselves into the future. Better make mine a double.
I found that the IRS just quietly rolling out. We talked about this a year ago, right? But the FedNow.gov, the IRS.gov started announcing and actually started detailing a formal plan for this year being the first year that they will support free, 100% free tax preparation via these official government websites, which I found particularly funny because it was the same time that those stories were hitting that I'm getting promotional emails in my inbox from my friends over at Intuit TurboTax who are like, hey, prepare your taxes early this year for a 30% discount. I'm thinking to myself, oh no, is this going to be the end of an era? Probably not everybody, because the IRS has a schedule. We found it was published on a Friday, likely. But the IRS is like, yeah, we're going to start running, down the list of people. We're going to start with state workers, federal workers first, then state workers. There's this whole rolling thunder of who's eligible. And, I think the moral of the story is eventually everyone will be on. And maybe it's not this year that people all 100% file that way, but I feel like we're within a couple of years, as soon as people realize it's free. And I think the data suggests that the majority of filers get a refund of some form or another. That sounds generally what's going on. So if it's as easy as filling out a form online, hitting submit and getting a check in the mail or direct deposited because blockchain is going to be used. I mean, what does this mean? It means that this is the first year that the government would like all of our data, 100% of it.
I think we got on this talking about taxes. We're rolling into the last week of January. Tax days is coming up. I'm putting the finishing touches on my 2023 taxes and starting to look ahead. And this Corporate Transparency Act that my accountant sent me that takes effect January 2025. You've got the IRS basically saying this year you're going to be able to file online. You've got Gary Gensler out there screaming from the rooftops that AI is the existential crisis, not cryptocurrency. And it would seem to me that if there's some sort of auto magic IRS filing, technology, log into the FedNow and file your taxes, ADP's passing that W-2 data straight over to the AI. They know how much your refund is, and it is extremely accurate. And it's going to continue to get more and more and more accurate the more of that data that's on blockchain. There is so much to get to. I think that is a whole topic in the financial system in and of itself. You've got more ETF news, people talking about when Ethereum ETF. There's rumors of Solana ETF. It's like once the floodgates open, now do these layer twos just get to pile in? Because, as long as the core underlying asset is classified as a commodity, then there's already the CFTC and this trading structure around ETFs to smooth it out. And they've been very successful at smoothing it out. I don't know what's your take on that. I want to get to Taylor Swift and deepfake AI, and what all of that means in terms of blockchain and why that conversation is being driven into the public narrative. I don't know.
Let's take that to tech and talk about how we're going to need hardware to visualize all this. And there's no real race. A race is on. And
this week, Apple VisionPro, this week.
And at the same time this week, we have competitors from outside of the US who are showcasing technology at CES, which we still really haven't taxed a deep dive on CES because there's been so much insane news moving. So we're going to get through all those things you just said. But I want to rewind for a second because you mentioned something that I feel like I should be aware of. A Corporate Transparency Act. How did your accountant find something that we missed and then send it to you. So it sounds like
get yourself a good accountant.
Is that you need to just, is it as just no disclosure until, well, what is the specific rule of the act that we should know?
The Corporate Transparency Act requirement will create a significant additional bureaucratic burden for clients. Basically, it says
that sounds great.
We will have to keep FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, apprised of any changes to entity ownership, such as, but not limited to, a change in beneficial ownership, a change in management, a change in control. They're really looking at who owns this company, and you've got to get that, any change to that happens over the next 12 months before the deadline of January 1, 2025. They want a clean ledger. They want a clean ledger of all the corporate transparency that they need to know who owns the assets, who owns the company, because if there is cryptocurrency on the balance sheet, aka MicroStrategy or aka any other publicly traded company at this point, including BlackRock, the biggest asset manager in the world, these guys have Bitcoin on the books, and we need to know who owns it.
That's right. So I can't instantiate an LLC in the next couple of months, take a gift of a massive amount of money and just start accumulating cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana. And then on Christmas of this year, I fire my CEO and I make you my interim CEO. And if I don't get that all dialed in and all my ducks in a row in advance of that, then the IRS, it sounds like, are going to, or maybe this new this crimes investigative group is going to
enforcement
then say,
network.
Wait a second. This isn't a company. This was a shell that was instantiated for the purposes of accumulating, and then some funny back office, changing of management. I have a stand-in, head of this, and I have a acting head of that. And now I'm actually able to obfuscate the ownership or maybe even the provenance of the crypto that I've been accumulating. So once again, sounds like everything is headed towards that Jan 1. Only now it's, first they said, hey, just keep buying stuff. Don't tell us about your losses or your gains. Then someone probably had that conversation with someone saying, wait a second, what if I don't know if I lost or gained because my company changed ownership? And now they're just playing catch up, adding in all these new rules to account for the fact that people who like to hide the money that they make from the government are going to try once again to do that in this new cryptocurrency world. Once that's now become normalized, cryptocurrency will just be like anything else. So you got to protect against the bad actors.
And I'll take us to another angle on this, which is the weird one that popped up in my my home Commonwealth here of Virginia. This bill moving through the Virginia State Senate to effectively protect Virginians' right to self-custody. Elizabeth Warren saying nobody can have a ledger of it. We've talked about this of, does the federal government go so far as to say you, Mr. Retail Investor, are not allowed to self-custody your digital assets? And here you've got a state legislation in effect designed to protect against this federal overreach into my wallet, into my ledger. And I think that's really interesting given the timing. We've been talking about for more than a year, Bitcoin is on the ballot. There is some slight movement with Vivek dropping out of the race and apparently, whispering in Trump's ear about the negative impacts of CBDC, and Trump spouting off about now he understands these things because his pal Vivek has told him just how horrible this would be. It is interesting to see the dominoes getting set up. We know the ETFs are now in motion. We know they don't have a surveillance partner. We know they're cash backed. We know there are likely going to be more. They've scheduled the Ethereum calendar is basically going to go through the same exact song and dance that the Bitcoin one went to. Meanwhile, you've got states setting up blockers to make sure that their individual citizens are going to have this right to self-custody the assets. This to me feels like the market in 2024 is going to market, and there will be those who accumulate and watch this, I believe, meteoric, what's the word I'm looking for? It's rising like a meteor. Why can I not think of the phrase?
A meteoric climb.
Meteoric. Thank you. I couldn't get there. And then not everyone's going to want it. Other folks are just going to say, I'll buy my GBTC. I'll get exposure through my 401k. I'm good. And I think that's where we're going to end up.
Well, we were just saying this term normalization. I know it's been used across so many industries and for so many things. When I talk about normalization, it's that there's an inflection point. There's an inflection point where that term or that concept, that the public's impression of being negative starts to move to neutral and then moves to positive. And we're seeing, I believe, we've been like waffling in the neutral for a while, because I think most people today, if you run into, would not knee-jerk react and say, oh, cryptocurrencies, well, that's all bad and evil stuff. There was a time when that was true, when this notion of like, well, fake money, internet, digital, that just sounds like a bunch of scams. Then neutrality comes in, because now you have actual positions of power questioning it. You have people like BlackRock, the CEO, Mr. Fink, going on about how this is the best thing in the world. As long as you're taking a position on it, you're effectively normalizing it, making it part of speech, right? Jamie Dimon, our favorite double talking gangster out of New York, who is somehow able, out of one side of his mouth every 4 years, to just defame Bitcoin and the concept of anything digital like that and say it's garbage, it's worthless, I would never use it, it's only used by bad actors and terrorists and human traffickers and killers. And then at the other side of his mouth, his entire company, JP Morgan, is actually rolling out Bitcoin ETFs and are fully backing it. And he has many, many ties from a corporate standpoint into that world. And then you have Elizabeth Warren, like you said, who says, hey, you shouldn't even be allowed to have a VPN. And then, you shouldn't even be allowed to have self-custody. You shouldn't be. If you are a terrorist, because you're de-dollarizing the American dollar, the economy, and all that the cryptocurrencies are used for are for evil deeds across the globe. So you have people shouting from the rooftops how much they love it, how much they hate it. But then you have the sober voices coming in at the start of this year, because I think we all know it's on the ballot. So when the CEO and the chair of NASDAQ, Dana Friedman, comes out and says, hey, everybody, we've been studying the movement of illicit funds for decades, because this isn't the first time that people have been funding bad stuff with currency. It just so happens sometimes today, sure, it's digital currency, but it's been cash and still is, by and large, for decades. Cash is king. People who want to do crimes don't want to worry about thumb drives. They want just a duffel bag of cash, by and large. And so when they printed this article that came out, I said to you, it's the end of last week, but they're talking about the just trillions and trillions of dollars that flow through. And the quote is just, I think it's very salient. Ultimately, we know that no single company, industry, technology, or government is going to solve the complex problems of financial crime. We all have to work together to be part of the solution. So not trying to cherry pick your 1, 2, 3 things. So I say all to say that everyone is going to start feeling like they own Bitcoin this year. And they're going to feel good about it.
Yeah.
But that smoothing out of these bumps that we keep going back and forth about, to get to the other point you made at the top of the show, is that even though the excitement is at its highest, and the amount of money that we're told, that just billions of dollars that's flowing into this brand new financial product called the Bitcoin Spot ETF, is not actually moving the price of real Bitcoin.
And, so strange.
And it's so strange. And when you think about Solana coming and Ethereum coming, and when, technology and technologists can't control something, because in this case, Bitcoin is just the algorithm. It's just technology, right? Can't control it. It's not like you can call them up and tell them to shut down operations. You can't threaten them where their kids live and all that. So what do? Well, you enact the American government's favorite tool, which is create another shiny object that's over here that looks and sounds so similar to the one that you wanted in the first place. But now my guy at the bank at Fidelity with the tie, we see him once a quarter, he's telling me about it. I like him. So we'll add some of that to our portfolio. Normalization. That's the word for me coming into this year.
Yeah.
It's going to become totally commonplace, and no one knows what they're buying.
the smoothing that you're describing. We've talked about the price, the roller coaster of crypto, the sort of emotional reaction that people have had over the last couple of years. All of this in my mind's eye, I picture the Gartner hype cycle image of the inflated expectations of new technology, the trough of disillusionment when FBX falls and crypto fails, and then it comes back up to what they call the plateau of productivity, and it is designed as a hype cycle. But you think about exactly how markets react, markets being Bitcoin in this case, and those who have bought in, those who are now holding for long term, will now see this plateau of productivity. You may not get the violent swings in these hype cycles the way we have over the last decade. You will get a slow and steady march, the way an S&P 500, the way the markets have worked for the last 100 years. And this is the starting point at the top of 2024. You got less than 12 months to accumulate, and then Corporate Transparency Act goes into effect. We, in essence, can control both sides of the house. We know who owns the Bitcoin, who had to buy it through our approved, our surveillance partners. We know who owns it in their 401k. We know which of these corporations we're buying and who owns those corporations. I cannot believe that we are sitting here at this point, and Gary Gensler is out there today still talking about AI is the existential crisis to affect our financial markets. I think he is screaming for regulation, as we have seen him do before, and I will use that as my segue into the AI regulation with our girl Taylor Swift, just making it known, I think, to the general public that there is now an issue with generative AI. This is not new, unfortunately, but I do think it drives the public narrative about some need to regulate this, right? To the average layperson listening, you may have heard about this, that there were nude images, generative AI images being created of Taylor Swift. They are not her, they are AI fakes designed to look like her. This also came up with the Joe Biden phone call. I don't know if you caught this, but talk about election, where it sounded like Joe Biden calling New Hampshire. So AI and the need to regulate that. How do you regulate it? You've got to be able to keep track of every iteration that gets created as a derivative. Every derivative market, every derivative asset, every derivative thing, whether it's an image, a video, a song, a movie, I don't care what it is, it will need to be tokenized so that there is a unique identifier with the ability to pull that back. Use the AI, use the scanning tool to go and find who the creator was, what the original source was, where it came from, and who owned it.
I mean, so if who owns this fake non-consensual nudity? So the platforms call it non-consensual nudity. The fact that it's fake, it's sort of, there's so many layers of deception, and there's so many layers to kind of peel back, because when you have Satya Nadella come up, because everyone has to make a statement, right? Take a position on this, right? It'd be very difficult for someone who is a known name, I think, to take a position where somehow this is good, right? But I thought it was a little bit funny. I don't mean to laugh like in that way. It's just sort of, it's humorous because the irony of it all, that Satya Nadella is having to say that it's fake Swift porn, and it's alarming and it's terrible. But almost him saying it's fake Swift porn or non-consensual nudity, that there might exist real Swift porn. Like, he doesn't say that it's just that the idea of it is bad, but that the fact that it's fake is, which is such a weird line to slice, right? Because if she really wanted to be nude on Twitter or on X,
would that be bad?
Would that be bad? Because that would be consensual nudity. She's over 18. Like, if she wanted to, she could. So these guys have to split these hairs by having to say things like, this is fake non-consensual nudity, because in some crazy world, she might consent to being nude on the internet, and then she would have absolute control over her image. I mean, it's interesting, this flashpoint, this, like you say, it sometimes just takes that right personality to create the conversation. The way that Warren and these others and Loomis coming in and just yelling things like, you use a VPN and you're a terrorist. I mean, Taylor Swift is kind of like the Bitcoin or the cryptocurrency to the NFL's cash economy. She's like the NFT that sort of arrives and disrupts stuff, right? She kind of is this digital thing, which sort of makes it really complicated when there are fake versions of her. I don't know how they're going to make sense of it. The AI is going to create the non-consensual nude of Taylor Swift, but then a new AI that's trained on all the fake non-consensual nudes is going to now police future fake non-consensual nudes. It just starts to feel like we're in this weird circle that's just ripe for corruption and disaster.
I saw headlines today from the Washington Post about Apple VisionPro is a privacy nightmare waiting to happen. That was the headline from today with the release of this hardware. All of the influencers have been seeded. I want to make one more point about Taylor Swift, and we can move to Apple Vision Pro. But when you say that she, is sort of this crypto to the NFL or this NFT that comes along, look, the woman re-recorded her catalog of music to own it. She needed to be the source of the creation in the studio, to lay down the track, to own the original Taylor's version. She understands ownership dynamics, and make no mistake, I think that is absolutely 100% playing in to her anger and her frustration and her being the catalyst of this public conversation right now around who owns her likeness. Most would agree she does. She owns her music. She owns her likeness. She should own and control whether her fake nudes are distributed or not.
Yeah, and you say she owns it, but she is so rare. Like you just said, she had to take the time to re-record all of her music and call it Taylor's version because of the bad and weird record deal that she had signed at some point when she was
antiquated ownership rules.
The antiquated ownership laws, which again, we are now seeing the antiquated ownership laws sort of melting away in real time as it pertains to securities, commodities, the notion of exchange-traded products. The analog could not be more hitting us in the face right now. And she is this person, this human embodiment. Like, she's Elizabeth Warren's worst nightmare. She is this self-standing, self-producing, self-owned entity that exists both in the physical world and the digital world. And she has the wherewithal and the resources and enough gumption to start marching down her own little road, knocking domino after domino and taking back her rightful ownership of all these things. And in this case, finally, where we are, just back to the beginning, she wants to take ownership over the fake non-consensual nudes to make it so that they can't exist, and if they do, they're hers and hers only. It's a very strange hill to fight on, and to play your flag, because I'm sure she doesn't want to be dealing with pornographers at this point in her life, but the reality is that you can't escape it, and unfortunately for women, it's even harder than men.
I was really impressed, in fact, that X, formerly known as Twitter, Elon Musk's platform, blocked the searches for anything related to Taylor Swift. And I think that's a bit of a double-edged sword, but at least in the immediate reaction, I was quite impressed. Elon has taken a stance in terms of free speech and, allows a lot of stuff and on the X platform, really relies on the community policing and literally that function of the community reaction to determine whether something is a fact or not. And I think that they took immediate reaction. It's also interesting to me because we know Elon Musk understands decentralization. We understands verifying users on the platform with an $8 a month fee and a blue check mark, and you are a human, and I know what you type in and what you tweet. And so any of those accounts that were sharing or originating the original digital version you can now follow the ledger. You can follow the timeline back to the original source of who owned it. And that is a wild segue, as we have also forever talked about Twitter as the original metaverse and those hallways and that digital world. It's the irony is not lost on me that this digital twin, this fake digital non-consensual twin porn happened in the original metaverse, and that it's happening the week that the Apple Vision Pro is opening this door, this Pandora's box into the next world. Beyond that.
The Washington Post is upset. I mean, if we are going to say that the X, formerly known as Twitter, was the original metaverse, and they're dealing with problems that, these problems have existed ever since the internet existed. They're still dealing with the problem of faking nudity, etc. And we're talking about the changing of entire leadership, from the acquisition, from the laying off, from, the would-be decency police of the old Twitter board who would spend, days all ruminating over what to do about this Taylor Swift problem. And, say what you will, but like you said, it's a very swift, decisive. We follow a very strict free speech, but there are certain things that aren't allowed, and we're going to try to come and expunge that behavior from this metaverse, which today is comprised of text in feeds with comments that hang off of it, threads, if you will, some photos, some videos, the provenance of which will all become, known on the ledger over time. And now you're saying, okay, your normal behavior of browsing this metaverse with your thumb as you stare down and having coffee is going to be replaced by an always-on pair of wearables that might start as ski goggles, might end up as Ray-Ban looking things or whatever. And now you're going to have to, for real, police and really deal with the issue of privacy, the vulnerability of certain people viewing things. How does it know your account and so forth, right? It's going to need to read your irises to know who you are. It's not going to be enough to look at your Apple ID.
Yeah.
And then Washington Post throwing that mud. Who owns the Washington Post? Old Jeffy Bezos. So there's nothing they're going to print in that rag that's positive about Apple. You got to remember now that technology leaders are becoming the new generation of the Rupert Murdochs.
New media,
It's not lost that if you can control the message, the signal, then you can steer the narrative, right? The United States government does this very well.
It's the premise of our entire podcast.
It's the entire show. Is someone steal the narrative? Well, it kind of feels like, how far are we away from Apple just acquiring a paper? The struggling New York Times, now owned by Apple TV. The struggling this, now owned by, at a certain point, is every publication just going to be talking about or talking negatively about their competitors? Kind of feels like it.
I'll dig a little bit on this Washington Post privacy nightmare for Apple Vision Pro, but given all of the cameras and all of the sensors that when you turn this thing on, it's scanning your room. It's using all of the LiDAR technology, the photogrammetry technology, a lot of the 3D and augmented reality stuff that I've talked about in past episodes and over the past years, to scan the room, to understand where to place these digital objects in its augmented reality pass-through. It needs to know where the walls are so that you don't walk into it if you're in a full immersive environment. Who gets access? The Post article asks this question of who gets access to that data? Who gets to see how many sofas I have in my home, how many doorways I have, how many light bulbs I have, how many bookcases I have? You have to really go real deep to start thinking and understanding that you are now talking about a Pandora's box. You're just opening up your entire living room, your entire home, everything you do. Now, who gets to see that data? How does it get used? How does it get mined? If I'm wearing this thing and I'm in the kitchen, maybe I'm literally doing the dishes while watching a movie, and my Dawn dishwashing detergent is getting low, right? I'm not even talking about the Dawn. I'm just doing the dishes, washing my thing, but it sees, it's a quarter below. and this little pop up, Dawn dishwashing sale is on sale now. Like, I'm like, what is that? Is that where we're going? That's a silly example.
I mean, it was not a silly example because it's the example that's the most approachable to most people. I mean, it steers into what everyone's thinking of. The Internet of Things. Remember IoT? IoT was the only thing that anyone could talk about at CES 5 years ago.
Everything is now going to be on.
Anyone says IoT, they say AI. And unfortunately, it's not going to even be the fancy thing of the goggles, like detecting the level of soap. And what's going to be amazing and bizarre is that as you pick up the soap and it recognizes the brand and it detects that your eyes are dilating and your heart rate is going up, and you're going to hear Siri say something like, I sense that you're becoming agitated. Are you running out of Dawn dish soap? Or is it because of the argument that you had last night with your partner? And you're going to be like, what? And that's going to pull up order Dawn or fucking talk to your therapist. So, I mean, you talk about that privacy, the door being blasted open. We had the Xbox camera, IC, whatever, it would watch you in your living room and watch you dance and stuff. Yeah. You had some PlayStation Move, some Nintendo Wii capturing data, right? Movement, doing stuff. Then you got a Tesla. Get in your Tesla, you drive around, the cameras are scanning everything. I'm surprised that Elon wasn't selling like Google Map data to Google because enough Teslas driving around just taking pictures of the road at all times. And they're not blurring out faces, right? Who knows where that data is even going? But you hear someone say, I was at an In-N-Out Burger, a burger stand in California, and there was a crime that occurred in the parking lot. Someone smashed a window of a Mustang and grabbed a backpack and something else and went running off. There was a whole commotion in the In-N-Out because someone was like, hey, that's my car. Comes out and someone comes over and says, hey, don't worry. You were parked right in front of me and I have the full thing recorded on my Tesla something.
Entry on the drive, yeah.
And then brings over the phone, and the next thing you know, they've got a video and they're like working with the police to send that to them. Okay, so now we're saying, okay, driving around in the parking lot and in the living room for the last 15 years, we've been scanning stuff. But now anywhere you are, and anyone or anything you're looking at now does become the privacy violation. Because I will tell you, if I'm walking down the street and there's someone wearing those goggles, I think my first reaction is going to be to avert my eyes because I'm going to assume it's filming everything that they're seeing.
Scanning you. Yeah.
And I don't know if I want to be seen wherever that person is. Maybe I'm not supposed to be there.
That behavior has become somewhat normalized with the phone. People, at concerts, they're holding up the phone, they're taking pictures of the crowd. Like people are used to being, I say, filmed in public places. I just think this does take it to a next level because it seems sort of passive in the action, whereas with the phone, like even I'm struggling to come up with the rationale for it because it's all a learned behavior. And I think we will hit this hype cycle of like the heightened and overblown expectation of what these XR things are going to do. I think we will hit a trough of disillusionment of like, am I actually doing this for everything? No. And then I think it'll bounce back to, okay, when I have a meeting and I need to do X, Y, and Z things, and now you see where I'm going with. Everything is going to follow that similar path. I think we are just XR, Meta, there have been Google Glasses. They've gone through a couple of these, but I think we're just now going to get to, the full capabilities of this new spatial computing era, as Apple is dubbing it.
Well, and maybe it's a good segue to talk about a few things, because this kind of comes in two sections to bring it back into a macro global view. We talk about our frenemies, and we really trying to clarify on the show that when we talk about some global powers, there's really only two that are relevant when it comes to technology and economics, which would be the United States and China. People talk about the big three, and so Russia, and we all know that they're not players in tech or in economics realms. They're more players in dysfunction, disruption, and chaos at this point. But that's all to say that we've already now been dealing with this nuancey thing, which is Americans love certain behaviors, like you're describing. The people at the stadium, at the concert, okay, I'll give you that. I mean, people at shows like that often like to be known they're at shows like that. But then what starts to change is the behavior. What's it like in real life? And yeah, kids are on their phones all the time. Are they always filming their surroundings, or are they mostly focused on their own thing? It's debatable. But what happens when TikTok, for example, as one of the most important apps on phones, it has a lot of usage in terms of like minutes chewed up during the day of people's screen time, is a Chinese-owned company. There's great questions around, well, where is the data going? And the emissary from China says, very straight-faced, oh, but we're assuring you and reassuring you that we're not collecting any data. And of course, we all know that that can't be 100% true. Well, now there's a new hardware company called Xreal, and I guess they were running around at CES, and they have an AR glasses. They're not saying AX or AR or VR, they're saying AR specifically. They raised some more money. They don't look anything like the VisionPro. They actually look like more or less a pair of weird fashion sunglasses. And they don't cost that much money, right? They're going to be less than what, $700-800 when they say they're going to come out. And they're going to come out this year. So and when you look about other stories that are happening, like Musk, so we bring it back to our pal Elon, just raised his fist in the back row and started screaming, hey, everybody, it's like, Tesla's quarter-over-quarter earnings have been really in the gutter these last 6 months. But don't focus on that, everybody. We need to be focusing on BYD, the largest electric car company in the world, who's out of China, who is going to start shipping electric cars so long as the United States allows this type of trade with China to the United States. And they're going to be, who knows, a third of the price, a half of the price of a Tesla, cheap. And there's something that I started reading more about, which is called it's like GDP dumping.
Yeah,
is a term, which is you can flood a market with lower cost products. China has done this to great success with plastic toys that we buy at Christmas. Where's the toy made? It's made in China. Well, gosh, what about those cool AR glasses of yours? What about that car of yours? Oh yeah, I just picked up the cheap one, that one I got from China. That would be the sort of American way of describing why they don't own the Tesla or the VisionPro. But are we prepared to have the same set of privacy rules that apply to Tim Cook and the Apple team out of Cupertino as it applies to Xreal and their CEO, Chi Shu, who's talking about how they're the first unicorn in AR glasses, and they're so excited at where we're heading beyond gaming, and they're going to be, the first to saturate the market. This is like the shots fired in the digital war of behavior and attention of consumers.
I think you're right. I think it is why Apple is taking the privacy so seriously with the purchasing process. I've watched a couple of the unboxing videos today. They're starting to hit the YouTube waves, and the setup process. The first thing it's doing is verifying you are the same person who purchased this thing. We collected your data on your phone. They don't talk about this. We collected your data here. We stored it in Cupertino. And then when we shipped you the device, we're just matching the data back. I mean, that's wild. They're literally connecting you to two pieces of hardware before you ever laid your hand on it. Yeah, it's a wild thing. But yes, I could see a Chinese company flooding the market with a low cost, XR, AR glasses. And you do start to then, Apple will continue to differentiate itself on privacy and trust of your wallet. Are you going to feel comfortable putting your credit card to make purchases using those Xreal glasses? I don't know. If I look at something, am I automatically going to get hit with a bill of like, oh shit, I didn't mean to buy that Tesla truck. I was just looking at it. That's it's a scary thing.
That's real. Like, did I blink twice too quick while I was staring at the Cybertruck? Does the VisionPro become your daddy's AR goggles? Where, hey, kids today, these new Xreals, they come preloaded with TikTok. And I'm ready to dance in front of the mirror. And I can film myself dancing. And I can even wear these glasses, and it has enough spatial 3D to know what I look like and to make me dancing anywhere. And do kids, today who don't have a lot of money, like you said, who don't like to buy in to these, most kids today don't even know what buying into a data plan or a family plan is, right? It's just right down off his cost of living at this point. Like, I have my kids on a watch, I have a phone, they have this, I manage it all.
Kids are like, wait, so do you pay a bill for that?
Yeah, when you give your kid a phone, when they get to high school age, which I recommend waiting to tell, then you're explaining to them, hey, you better save up some cash because I'm gonna have to shake you down for close to $500 a year, pal. And they're like, for what? Like, so you can all turn that thing on and play Brawl Stars with all your pals. Like, kids are gonna get it. So I really do see an opportunity for this, again, this narrative being reshaped. That, like, what is it exactly, 15-year-old, that you want to do with an AR device? And the creators and all the King's Horses, all Team Cook's men, have all their ideas of what you're supposed to do. But maybe someone just needs to ask a 15-year-old, and maybe they did, and there's going to be 3 or 4 of the things that they responded built into these Xreal glasses. It will cost 1/5. It will cost 20% of a VisionPro. Yeah, and there's things called no-brainers. But if you're in the business of being an influencer, I mean, it's one thing to be Apple's lackey. It's another thing to actually get out there and try to, like, make yourself the brand. I feel like they're going to be smart with a lot of these lower cost promotions.
I will leave a little teaser, and then we'll get final thoughts here, which is, I think, next week when we record. So it's Tuesday, January 3rd. We'll be back next week.
30th.
Sorry, January 30th. Yes, apologies. We'll be back in February after Apple Vision Pro has actually hit the market. I've got some insider scoop on some of the brands that are going to have apps ready the first day one. Some of this has been released, some of this has not, but we'll talk about exactly what you're describing, which is Apple had to take some bets on which of these apps do you want inside of Apple Vision Pro. Of the people who purchased it, how are we going to keep them engaged? Apple's got a list of brands that they're going to bring to bear with apps on day one. So we can cover that next week. Any final thoughts before we send them out?
My final thoughts are the way that the confluence of seemingly separate events often conflate and come together in the most special way. And when I think about the conspiracy theorists who talked about the outcome of the Super Bowl, that who would be playing, was already a fait accompli, because you introduce Taylor Swift and the power of the Chiefs, the Swifties, and the digital metaverse, and you integrate that with San Francisco and the birthplace of Silicon Valley, and you put it on the weekend that just so happens to be the Chinese Lunar New Year. Is there a scenario where on my couch while I'm watching the game, I could look to my left and see Taylor and whatever she's doing in the booth, and look to my right and see a animated dragon that breathes fire and smoke every time the Chiefs score? I feel like there's one more thing, and you know what? Could be Tay-Tay.
Oh, I can't wait for it. We will do it again next week. We'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon, man.
That's all the time we have for this episode of Off the Record on the Rocks. Join us next week for more news on all things Web3. Check, please.